ABC News Election 72 continues. Brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealers. See all the better ideas for 73 at your Ford dealers. Now from election headquarters in New York, Howard K. Smith and Harry Reasoner.
It's now 10 o'clock in the evening here in the eastern United States, and President Nixon maintains his long popular lead over McGovern. Our board shows Nixon with a steady 64% to McGovern's 35%. I said steady. In fact, that was 67% about an hour ago. It went down to 65. Now it's down to 64. Let's see how that works out in electoral votes. In electoral votes, the president should have something around 372 to McGovern's 17. 372, 270 needed to elect. McGovern 17 due to Massachusetts and the District of Columbia.
And I think the electoral vote's about to go up again. And we have a new gubernatorial projection in Missouri, in the home state of the first Democratic vice presidential candidate, Thomas Eagleton. The Republican, Christopher Bond, has won. ABC News projects with 58% of the vote over the Democrat Dowd. It will make Christopher Bond the youngest governor in the nation, and the first Republican governor elected in Missouri since 1944. That gives the Republicans their first net change of one.
Harry, incidentally, we have a projected result in the presidential election in Missouri. Nixon won the state by an eyelash in 1968, 4 years ago. By our projection, he wins Missouri again tonight.
The question will come up, I suppose, what effect the whole Eagleton affair had in Tom Eagleton's home state, where he's been very popular and where he campaigned very hard for the whole Democratic ticket and for Senator McGovern.
But he is about the only Democrat not embittered by the Eagleton affair in Missouri.
In Missouri, yes, they didn't like it. There's another state where Senator McGovern has a chance before we get to the Middle West and to the West, a chance to increase his electoral total, and that's the state of Rhode Island. Only 4 electoral votes, the nation's smallest state, with 2% of the precincts in there. McGovern is holding a substantial lead over Nixon, 55% to 45%. The totals are very small, but almost all of the totals in Rhode Island are very small. Senator Humphrey took Rhode Island better than 2-1 over Nixon and Wallace in 1968. It is a permanently Democratic state. It may this time still stay in McGovern's column.
I would like to take a look at 2 states now. The Senate race in the state of Maine is turning out to be rather surprising. The incumbent Republican senator is Margaret Chase Smith, though very small percentage of the votes are counted there. And she's fallen behind in that count. And in our key precinct vote, she's fallen rather further behind. This is a surprise. Congressman Hathaway is very popular, but we didn't know he was that popular.
I thought it was against the law to vote against Congressman or Senator Chase Smith in Maine.
It's like voting against Mike Mansfield in Montana. It's sacrilegious. In the state of Wisconsin, a very tight presidential race. Nobody seems to be pulling ahead in our key precinct vote. However, at present, Nixon holds the raw vote lead with only 3% of the precincts having reported in. But I have to issue the warning that that state is extremely close in the key precincts, which will tell the outcome.
I think what we're saying, Howard, and I don't think we can be accused of saying it in our own self-interest, is that the evening is far from over in terms of interest, even though Mr. Nixon stands with 372 projected electoral votes. A lot of things we don't know yet, how big a landslide it's going to be. There's a chance, if his popular figure held as it does, as it has now, that it may be the biggest landslide in history, which would make Lyndon Johnson mad. I think he relished that title.
At this point, it would be the biggest if he can hold on to 64%, but Johnson does have the title. In 1964, he won 61.1%. Second to him was FDR in 1936 with 60.8%, and then Harding third with 60.3%. But it remains to be seen, with the votes to be counted, whether Nixon can maintain that 64% lead. If he does, it'll have all kinds of repercussions. I'm sure so far in the past, every landslide has persuaded the president to make a mistake. It persuaded FDR to pack the Supreme Court, and he lost all his leverage with Congress. It was a factor in persuading Lyndon Johnson that he could move as freely as he did. I don't know what to do the next.
One of the men who has been projected as a loser in a senatorial race is President Nixon's former Postmaster General, the man who presided over the change in the U.S. postal system, Winton Red Blunt. And with him is ABC's John McVane. We'd like to hear from them.
Mr. Blunt, when we talked a little earlier in the day, you told me you thought you had a very good chance, that it might be a very close race, and that you might beat the Democratic Senator Sparks. But what happened? How did the roof fell in?
Well, the people of Alabama didn't vote for me.
Well, was there any reason to? What would you have done differently, or?
Oh, I don't think we would have done a thing differently. We had a great organization, great volunteers all over the state. We had fine professional staff. Our strategy, looking back on it, I wouldn't change a thing of it. We worked very hard. We just didn't win.
Well, did the president give you support? After all, you are his friend, his former postmaster general. Did he give you what you regard as real support?
Well, he certainly did. He made of course, a television spot and a radio spot for us. The vice president was here, and the Secretary of Butts, Secretary Morton, Tricia Nixon Cox was here, and Ed Nixon, the president's brother. I would like for the president to have come to Alabama, of course, but he didn't come to a lot of states, as you know. But the president won overwhelmingly, and I lost very substantially.
Well, I know you lost very substantially, but it looked very close for a while. What happened? Why the big margin?
Well, I don't know. I really haven't had time to analyze the vote as yet. Again, all we can do is say that we wouldn't change what we've done. We worked hard at it. The voters of Alabama didn't choose to vote for me.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Blunt, for talking with us this evening, and you've now conceded. And that's the story here in Montgomery, Alabama, from the Whitley Hotel in Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt and John McVane. I don't suppose there's any better way to put it when you're saying you're defeated. They didn't vote for me. We'll have more on Election 72 in just a moment.
I'm Ara Parsegian, football coach at Notre Dame. If a quarterback could take only one play into the game, it should be an option play. He can run, he can pitch out, or pass. 3 options. Ford gives you its own version of the triple option play on the mid-size 1973 Ford Torino Squire. The 3-way door gate. It opens like a door, fast, even with the window up. It opens with the window down, and it opens like a tailgate, or big loads like 4-foot-wide building panels. 3 options. And you find the 3-way door gate on the world's best-selling full-size wagon, the quiet new 1973 Ford Country Squire, along with Ford Motor Company exclusives like dual-facing rear seats. See the new 1973 wagons at your Ford dealers. When it comes to wagons, nobody swings like Ford.
One of the most interesting races for the Senate is the one in Texas between Barefoot Sanders and John Tower. We haven't been able to call a winner yet, but Mr. Sanders is now in Dallas, Texas, and ABC correspondent Charles Murphy is with him. Can you come in, please?
Howard, I'm sitting with Mr. Sanders in his Dallas headquarters. The raw vote total shows him trailing Senator Tower, but the ABC key precincts show that the race is neck and neck at this point. Mr. Sanders, what about your key precincts? Have you checked around the state, and what have you heard?
Well, what we've been doing is checking around the state. For instance, in Harris County, where you have about 15% of the vote.
That's Houston.
That's Houston. And projection down there right now is that we will carry that county about 54-46, 55-45 out of roughly 600,000 votes. That's a rough projection, which I just got from Houston. I would say in the South Texas area in the valley, I'm not running as strong as I figured I would. East Texas is about like we thought. Dallas is...
what is East Texas doing?
I'd say East Texas, we're winning in the areas in East Texas that we expected to win, but it's a little bit closer than I thought it would be. The McGovern-Nixon situation is obviously having some impact on this race.
You mean the coattails are reaching out for Mr. Tower to some extent?
Yeah, not very long, but somewhat. You see, Nixon's apparently carrying Texas about 70-30 at this point, and so you're getting some coattail effect on that.
Do you believe in this so-called penance theory?
Well, there is something to that. I don't know that I would ever have described it as a penance theory. It's just the idea there are a lot of folks who are Democrats, and a number of others who are really kind of independent would normally vote Democratic on the state level. I don't know whether it's penance that would keep them in the Democratic column or just a matter of the way they traditionally vote.
But Tower, with such an established name and reputation in Texas, 11 years in the Senate, would have been a tough opponent even if President Nixon hadn't run so strong, would he have not?
Oh, no question about that. The whole situation here was finding the dissatisfaction with Tower and his record. And I thought it was there. I still think it's there, but obviously it's a very close situation. But they're two different things. No matter who was at the top of the ticket, you were looking at an 11-year incumbent with about 100% name identification. And then added to that the rather difficult situation at the top of the ticket.
Yes. Now, there's been a very heavy vote in Texas, much bigger turnout than in '68, perhaps 20 or 25% more. Do you think this worked in your favor, getting all these people to the polls?
That's been my theory, and I still think it's true. It's too early for me to say that our theory was proved in the event. But right now, for instance, there are about 205 or 10,000 votes, the last count I saw a few minutes ago, counted. And it looks like there'll be a vote turnout of 4 million or better.
You were outspent considerably by your opponent, weren't you?
Oh, very substantially.
What was it, about 5 to 1?
Yeah, I'd say it's about 6 to 1, the last I heard. We put about $350,000 into this general election campaign. The last report I saw on Tower, which was filed as of 10 days before the election, he had spent about $2,200,000.
That's as much as anyone has ever spent, or that's as much as any listed spending that I know of in Texas.
That's the most I've ever heard of. In fact, it was reported to be more than any other Senate or congressional race in the country.
Well, Mr. Sanders, whether you win or lose, you have left your imprint all over Texas. The barefoot symbol, the symbol representing Mr. Sanders' middle name, or his first name now, I believe it is.
Middle name.
Middle name.
Always gone.
That's the story from the Sanders headquarters in Dallas.
Thank you, Charles Murphy. We have two more interesting projections in South Dakota in the gubernatorial race in Senator George McGovern's home state. One of his old associates, Richard Knipe, has won re-election to a second term, ABC News projects. Mr. Knipe has not talked a lot about Senator McGovern in the campaign, but he has certainly not disowned him either. And in Colorado, where there has been considerable question about whether or not the voters will approve having the Winter Olympics there in 1976, there hasn't been much question about how they would vote for president. And ABC News now projects that in Colorado, Mr. Nixon will win and gain an additional 7 electoral votes.
Harry, you were talking about South Dakota. In the Senate race in South Dakota, we have a projected result on that. In the Senate race in South Dakota, James Abourezk, the Democrat, is declared the winner over the Republican Robert Hirsch. Congressman James Abourezk has won, by our projection, the Senate seat from South Dakota.
It could be considered moderately good news for Senator McGovern, and he's not having much good news tonight. If you looked at a map of the United States right now, if you were flying in a jet and could look down and see what states were stained McGovern color, you would hardly be able to see them. There's Massachusetts way up on the right-hand side and the District of Columbia down just off the Potomac. This must be well realized out at McGovern's headquarters at Sioux Falls, South Dakota. ABC's Frank Reynolds and Frank Tomlinson are out there. I'd like to hear from them.
Yes, well, obviously, there's not much cause for dancing in the streets of Sioux Falls, South Dakota tonight. Senator McGovern, we understand, has prepared his statement of concession. As a matter of fact, I'm told he may have worked on it this afternoon before the polls closed. I think now probably the only thing that people are waiting for here in this hotel lobby and across town at a coliseum that they had set up for the victory celebration is for Senator McGovern's concession statement. And you know, there's some interest in what he will say. I'm reminded of a story he tells about a conversation he had with a young black man in New York not long ago. And this young man said to him, "Senator, this election is going to break your heart because the American people are not as decent and as good as you think they are." McGovern argued with that young man and told him that he thought he was wrong. The other morning, I asked him, "What will you say? How will you feel about the country if you really get hurt?" Well, I think his heart will be broken, but I don't think he's going to blame the country. And I think he'll probably come out here sometime later tonight and express his love for the nation. He probably will not do it here in this crowded hotel lobby. The Coliseum across town is where the celebration or the post-mortem is to take place, and ABC's Frank Tomlinson is there.
There hasn't been the sign of a politician here in the Sioux Falls Coliseum so far, not national, not local. But that hasn't dampened the spirits of this crowd. Just a few seconds ago, when ABC projected the winner of Aberesk here in the U.S. Senate race, it brought a big cheer. Meanwhile, the people are listening to a rock and hillbilly band in the back, and behind me is the Arlington, South Dakota High School Band, one of the outstanding bands in the state. They're keeping the spirits up here in the Coliseum, although everyone seems to agree that now the only thing they're waiting for is for George McGovern to come here and make his concession speech. And that's the story here at McGovern headquarters.
Harry, we have our 14th projected winner in the Senate races. There are 13 Senate races being contested in the state of Minnesota. By ABC News projection, Walter Fritz Mondale, the Democrat, retains his seat in the Senate in his contest against a Lutheran minister named Philip Hampson. I'd like to remark about Jim Aberesk winning that South Dakota seat. That seat had belonged to a Republican, and Carl Mundt. And that makes the second seat the Democrats have taken from the Republicans. The Republicans have not won any from Democrats tonight.
In the presidential race, in the so far steady sweep through the Middle West of President Nixon, ABC News has now projected that he will be the winner in Nebraska with its 5 electoral votes, running about 66 to 34% ahead of Senator McGovern. We'll have more on Election 72 in just a moment.
Diamonds. Even up this close, they're a blind purchase. After all, how do you know what to look for when you don't know what you're looking at? Just to prove a point, this diamond, which looks so magnificent, isn't magnificent at all. In fact, it's so full of flaws you'd never find it in the J.C. Penney store. This is a J.C. Penney diamond. To the untrained eye, there's no difference. But to our jewelers, there's all the difference in the world. At J.C. Penney, we know what you're looking for. Everybody knows kids are rough on clothes. What you don't know is we're pretty tough on them first. Take these children's sleepers for $4.98. They'll wear night after night and keep their color and fit. How do we know? Our testing center tests them. We grind the fabric under a wheel. We rip it and stretch it. We wash it over and over again. So you know and we know these sleepers will do what we say they will. You see, our testing center doesn't kid around. At J.C. Penney, we know what you're looking for.
I'd like to focus your attention briefly on 2 very interesting Senate races, one in the state of Virginia. In the state of Virginia, the incumbent Democratic senator is William B. Spong, and his opponent is Congressman William L. Scott. William Scott was thought to be far behind Spong, but now he turns out to be ahead of him with 53% of the precincts in. This is a seat the Republicans could take away from the Democrats. Also, the state of Iowa. Here's a surprise. In the raw vote in the state of Iowa, the almost unbeatable Iowa Senator, Jack R. Miller, is trailing the almost unknown Democratic contender, Dick Clark. These are 2 we want to watch for the rest of the evening.
I think we have a...
Oh, yes, here's an important Senate race, a very important Senate race in the state of Rhode Island. Claiborne Pell is projected to win re-election to the Senate in one of the tightest races in the nation over John Chafee, the former governor of the state. And in the state of New Mexico, we have a winner, a very tight race. The Republican candidate, Pete Domenici, wins election over Jack Daniels, the Democrat. Now, that is a seat the Republicans have taken from the Democrats. That seat was held by Clinton Anderson, the Democrat who is ailing and who is retiring. It has been won by a Democrat, and that's the Republicans' first victory tonight. Let's see how the Senate races look in toto now. The Democrats have won 10 seats, the Republicans 6. There's a net gain. The Democrats won 2 they didn't have before, but the Republicans have won 1 they didn't have before, so the net gain for the Democrats is 1.
That's about the way so far that the races among the governors are splitting. So far there's a net Republican gain of 1, a Democratic gain of 1, meaning a net gain of 0 for the 2 parties put together. The big sweep of this big sweep tonight has been in the South, and watching that in Montgomery, Alabama, is Governor George Wallace and ABC's Bill Werdum. Bill?
Governor, we've seen the South vote heavily tonight, most heavily since the days of Reconstruction, in favor of a Republican president. Do you think this signifies a new political alignment down here in the South?
I think, of course, that it means that the average citizen in this part of the country thinks about platform and thinks about demand. It just so happens that the Democratic Party rejected planks in the platform in Miami that the overwhelming majority of Southerners stood for. And those planks later were adopted by the Republican Party. And I predicted in Miami to the liberal Democratic Convention that if they rejected these planks on the matter of national defense, on the matter of busing, on the matter of welfare, law and order, that they would lose, and they did lose. And I think that the Democratic Party is going to have to be restructured, taken back over by those who believe that the average citizen should be the king and queen of the Democratic Party as they used to be. And I think they've rejected the liberal, elitist viewpoint of those who control the convention in Miami.
Well, Governor, it seems there's going to be a new kind of Reconstruction here in the South. Are you going to be part of that new Reconstruction?
Of the Democratic Party?
Yes, sir.
Since I received more votes than the other candidates, including Mr. McGovern, in the primaries in which we contested one another, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maryland, Florida, you add them up where we were all together, I received more votes on the platform that I offered to the Democratic Party that was rejected.
Governor, we have to go. Thank you very much, sir.
A very important projected result in the state of Wisconsin. By our projection, Nixon carries Wisconsin. And in the state of Louisiana, in the Senate race, in the state of Louisiana, in a three-cornered and very difficult Senate race, J. Bennett Johnston, Jr., a Shreveport lawyer, has defeated his two opponents. And that's the National Election 72 story at 22 minutes after the hour.